Nicolette, and today Brian and I are here with Stephanie Mackara. She is the president of Charleston Investment Advisors, and she's going to talk to us today about wealth and money and finances and how it affects children and all kinds of fun stuff money related. So thank you so much for joining us today, Stephanie.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
So can you tell the users a little bit about yourself and your journey to finance industry?
Sure. Yep. So I came a really strange route to get here, but makes for a good story, I guess. I was a psychology. I'm originally from the Philadelphia area. So I grew up in Philadelphia and went to Westchester University, which is a state school in Philadelphia area. And I was a psychology major, mainly because I was just drawn to it. I enjoyed psychology and the classes and just loved it. But while I was in college, I did take 2 economic classes and really enjoyed the psychological impact of markets and learning about that. And was fortunate enough when I graduated that I waitressed through college and I worked next door to a Merrill Lynch. And I guess through a good work ethic, they said, come here, you show up every day, we see you every morning, do you want a job? And so you can't do a whole lot with a psychology degree. So I figured I needed to get some work experience and I started there. I didn't know what a mutual fund was. I barely knew what a stock was. And so I was really fortunate to have some really good mentors and hold my hand and help me out along the way. And then I was fortunate enough to join a startup company that worked with fiduciary registered investment advisors. I don't know if you're familiar with that is, but it's instead of working for an organization, you're independent and provide advice that's in the best interest of clients. And while I did that, I then went to law school. And so I think it's the analytical bit of psychology, the law, and the finance that really drew me in. And so my professional career has always been in finance, but along the way, my education is really, in psychology and the law. But it's great. And I think it helps out tremendously when working with clients and understanding them.
Silly, and you can give them free therapy.
We all need free therapy.
Stressed about their finances.
Exactly.
Well, recently, Stephanie, we came across something you'd written about 4 keys to financial freedom. And I think you were speaking specifically about children. And I wanted to really open with that. Why is it so important for us to start talking about financial independence and finances in general with our children? And kind of, let's talk a little bit about what's appropriate for kids.
Sure. So, I'm a strong believer that the earlier the better. And obviously there's age appropriate content, but I said my son is 13 years old, and I try every day. There's a term called financial socialization, and financial socialization is the way children learn about money. So there's a great push from the government and from school agencies to have finance classes in school, in college, and I think it's great, but all of the research supports that the best teacher is the one at home. Which is not any different than really anything else that our children learn. And so if we can model good financial practices, our children will learn good financial practices. I grew up in a family that really didn't discuss money, and it was almost taboo. And, I don't think I'm that unique. I think I'm 48 and Gen X, and our parents just didn't talk about money. And so anything I learned was by mistake almost. And so I think it's important to figure out your own comfort level, and as young as possible, teach kids about needs versus wants. Teach them to leave a tip and figure out how much money they should what's 20% of the bill. And even more important than financial socialization are habits. I mean, there's so many books out there about how habits drive success. And it's no different in, exercising, eating right, and finance. And so your child, I think that if you only do one thing, when your child gets money, they save 20% of whatever they get. even if it's in a gift card, figure out 20%, give them the remaining cash and save the rest. And if they start from a very young age, that's what they'll do. When they get their first paycheck, they'll save 20%. And the reason it's more important now than ever is the book I wrote, it's called Money Minded Families, How to Raise Financially Well Children. And it was before COVID. And now it's even more pronounced of a, significance, is that our country, Americans in general, there's so much debt. Social Security, the benefits that we're used to getting, pensions, they're not going to be there for most of our children. And so everything they have to retire on will be there, what they've saved, what they've built either through a business or what they've saved towards retirement. And so they need to know it's no longer, excuse me, a luxury to manage wealth. It's a necessity. So teach them the game of life, play Monopoly, whatever it is, start and get them thinking about it and talking about it.
So I'm totally with you. Best teachers are the teachers at home that teach you about money. Totally agree. But here's a question I have, right? Because, I have daughters that are just completed first grade, and they're teaching them like, here's a quarter. A quarter is, 24 quarters is $1, right? With things changing and sort of like the concept of physical money going away, how do you sort of, because money becomes abstract. They're like, just put it on your card. You know what I mean? Like, how do you sort of explain it to younger kids when money has become more of an abstract concept than a physical dollar or quarter or?
Yeah,
Great point.
it's at no point. I mean, this is the other reason that it's so important to teach, because it's so easy to spend. You don't even have to think about it. You don't even have to count out money. You just swipe a card and it's, in the Amazon cart, you push a button. Mm-hmm. So I think, particularly with younger children, I would go old school. I mean, there's something called a moon jar, and it's a company that creates this bank. And there's other ones out there, but it's save, spend, and share sections. And they literally put the money in and they see it growing. There's technology out there. I've looked at a lot of different apps to help replace the physical, and there just isn't anything good at this point that I've found. So eventually there'll be some technology that, the future generations, it will feel to them the same as, moving that money around. But right now, it's the same as when you have a budget, writing down what you're spending and looking at it monthly or quarterly versus just looking online at a, bottom line figure. It's not the same. It's not the same process. So unfortunately, I think they do have to still, tangibly see the money and save the money and count the money.
I agree. Actually, that's, because I wasn't taught anything about money, and I am trying to do that with my son, and he's only 5, but it's funny because he's already getting a concept that I didn't learn until last year. No, but until recently, really, and he's like, I want to save for an iPhone 11. And I'm like, wow, I never would have thought that, because things were just kind of handed to me, and it was a very spoiled mentality my parents gave me. And so then they kind of cut me loose, and I was like, oh crap, I don't know what to do anymore. Now I'm on my own, I was like, all right, here I am with a family, and I got to start paying for things, and so I'm trying that with my son, and it's I take him to the bank with me, and I think maybe that's something, I take him to the bank and I show him, okay, here's your birthday money, and let's go put it in the bank, and or hey, let's go to Target, and he brings his gift card, if it's a gift card. It's hard though for a child, and to your point, Brian, to really conceptualize, okay, there's $50 on this card. I've now bought, I can buy one toy, especially for a 5-year-old who can't do math like that yet. I can buy a toy. Can I buy 50 toys? I have $50. Now, he's like, okay, so this card is still valid after this, and it's a hard concept, but I think maybe like the gift card has kind of made that bridge for me in teaching him about the card.
I would replace the gift card with money. That's what I did, just because
I like money.
And honestly, if you get a $50 gift card from someone, I was taking 20% of that and saying, you only have, this much
Right.
left. Here's
Right.
the cash, which is work. I mean, it's just, but so is anything else that we're teaching our
Yeah.
kids. It's just, and it's important work. I always say, I feel like we spend so much time, which is great, on a physical, what they're eating, socially, emotionally, we're worried about, but finances are always, sort of pushed to the side. And like you said, you grew up and you were given things. And if our kids don't know the value of the things they're getting, it's our own fault, right? It's not their fault. It's our own fault for them not, valuing things, not really understanding. And even at 5, I mean, something you could do is price out options, right? It's that research. It's the, okay, did you look on Amazon? How much was it? Is it, how much is it at Target? And just show what a cost savings is. And so you can take these big, words and ideas and really break them down for any age. So it's, but it's just important. And every opportunity you get to talk about money, to talk about saving, to talk about the right type of spending is critical. Even if you're looking for a new washer and dryer, the fact that you're pricing out options, that you're learning, the best thing out there and you're waiting for a sale.
Mm-hmm.
And, they can be part of that discussion, and they may not understand everything, but they'll learn to do the same thing when they're older.
Do you think it could take a negative turn in a sense, and kind of put a lot of stress on some children? And I'm speaking from a situation I've seen where, a parent talks too much about money and some of that pressure that they're under with that child. And now they're worried about everything they buy and they spend, and no, I can't have. So do you think it could have a negative effect as well?
Totally. So financial socialization is the way children learn, right? And there's positive and negative. So if you're financially socializing your child and attaching stress to the conversation, your child will learn stress from that situation. And so in the book, one of the things I do is I say, as parents, I have them take a money personality quiz, right? So they really understand, like, what am I bringing? Like, what baggage am I bringing to this?
Right.
So that they can, kind of check themselves a little bit and say, wait a second, and I'm what's called a social value spender, which sounds awful. I mean, I'm like, oh my gosh, but and so I will, splurge on certain things but I have also made sure that I've buttoned everything up and saved, and I'm not overspending. So if there's something I really want, I will save for it, but I'll also maybe, spend more than somebody else might. And that's okay. But I'm completely aware of it. I've checked all my boxes. I've made sure that, I can afford to do it. My husband he's the opposite. He's like he's super risk averse. And so we make an interesting, imagine my poor son trying to learn from both perspectives. But I think it is true. It could be negative, but it's like anything else. If you kind of know your weaknesses and you're aware of them and you're mindful of them, you can better teach and understand what you're sharing and relaying to your children.
So you mentioned also sort of earning money, right? Like saving money to get to a point where you buy the thing you want, because sometimes you need to save for that. Like me growing up, my dad was like, if I was like, oh, I want X, he'd be like, okay, you could come work at my job for me, or you could do this for me, and I'll pay you whatever until you save up. And I remember being a kid being like, oh my gosh, I got to work for like 30 hours or whatever to, save up for whatever I want, because it's probably something technology based. So it's probably pretty expensive. But I remember really understanding that, like, grabbing that concept of, okay, I got to work these amount of hours to be able to afford that. How important is that? Not just like kids getting gift cards, right? And being able to spend that money, but them understanding the concept of learning, how to make money and save for things.
Yes. So the learning how to earn and learning why you're earning is crucial. And so that's why, and you can't get there now until, probably 16. I mean, my son, unfortunately for him, I have him work here in my office, filing, shredding, and
13-year-old dream.
That was my childhood. It's okay. It's good.
Yeah, he does the same thing. He's like, well, how many hours? And then I'm like, well, do you really want that thing or not? And sometimes the answer is, no, I'm good. You know, and I'm like, okay, well, you're still going to do the work because I need it done, but you can save it for something else, right? But no, I think learning, so it's not just earning, it's, you know, earning and then really seeing, okay, where is this money going, right? Because a lot of people will earn and then spend their whole paycheck, particularly when they're teenagers, their first job, and then they have nothing left. And so really understanding if I want something, you know, and parents can do it in so many ways, right? They can match what children earn so that they get closer to getting something, you know, so it's not 100% on them. There's a lot of ways.
Like a 401k for parents, you know.
Yeah. Oh yeah, no, it's, and the, you know, the negative is kids have so many activities now that take up all of their time. So it is difficult. It's not, when I grew up, I mean, our summers weren't spent, I played sports, but I didn't spend all summer, you know, working at that sport. I got a job at a swim club or something. Now it is different. So their ability to earn is definitely minimized. But I think there, you know, there's creative ways. I mean, my son will go on, because technology allows them to do a lot more. He'll go and buy sneakers and flip them. You know, buy them when they're dropped or whatever the lingo is, and then, you know, sell them for some ridiculous amount. And so it's encouraging them to find creative ways to earn money. I think that's legal, obviously.
I wish my parents had the parent 401k when I was a kid.
Yeah.
I like that idea though, like matching the money they do go in there. I do like that.
That is cool. My husband used to find golf balls on the golf course as a kid and clean them and then resell them to the golfers. So he tries to instill that hustle, that nice.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, there's a little too much of my attitude towards money, which brings me to my next question about money personalities. You mentioned money personalities. How many are there? I mean, what are we talking about?
Yeah, so there's a lot of different books on this, but the Financial Times has a really good one, and I think they have 6 or 7, you know, from, you know, the Fitbit financier or something, where it's just flashy flat, you're just spending money you don't have, to the, you know, ostrich who just, their head is in the sand, they just can't, and everything in between.
Right.
And what's nice about that quiz is you sort of have an A and B, right? So your primary is one thing and your secondary is another. So it really, you know, helps to, like I said, just give you clarity about the things that you could possibly, you know, overspend on, or, you know, what you're modeling for your children.
So how, once you understand what your behavior, your personality type is, you know, how do you then go about changing that? I mean, that's really, so the person who doesn't spend on anything, that kind of ostrich in the sand kind of person, should they be changing their behavior? Even, you know, I mean, is there an extreme on both sides, would you say?
There is, and I think it's like anything else, it's just awareness. I mean, so many people go through life without really being aware of their, I don't want to call it deficiencies, but just their unique personalities on all different levels. And so once you're aware of, and I always go back to like exercise and eating and health, right? Once you're aware, you start tracking how much you're eating, and where all of a sudden you're like, oh my gosh. It's the same thing with spending or not spending, right? You look at it and you say, mint.com, we use all the time with clients, and are you guys familiar with it? So it's a budgeting tool, but it pulls in, you know, all your different, you know, whether you're using credit cards or your bank account, and it gives you this visual of, you know, a pie chart of where you're spending your money. And inevitably food, you know, it's like big for everyone.
Yes, it's like you were here in my house when we were, you know.
It's
embarrassing too, to be honest with you. It's embarrassing to be so careless, and not to say that food is so careless, but to go food shopping, spend so much money food shopping, and then find yourself, when you look at it on paper, say, oh my goodness, I spent all this money shopping, and then on top of that, I spent double that in food out.
Right, eating out.
And that, you know, it's just, it makes you feel like dirty.
Yeah, but then you can look at that and say, you know, maybe I'll cut back by 10%, because we really don't need all this food. Because sure, half of, not half of it, some of it's getting wasted. So it's to start to really be aware and then make good decisions based on that. It's, so you can change. I mean, someone's not going to go from one extreme to the other, but you'll work within, your own comfort level just to get better like anything else.
So you mentioned food. Is there areas where other people have a tendency to overspend, that you've seen through your various different clients?
Yeah, I mean, it's food. I mean, and people will, the mortgages, right, overextend themselves. We see it a lot with physicians. They've spent years and years in school, and they come out, they're not making a lot of money in residency, and they come out and just are making bank, right? But instead of really thinking about, okay, still living a little bit better, but not living extreme, they tend to go extreme. And I'm not talking about all physicians, but they'll go extreme, get the big house, get the best car, and then it just builds on itself, right? You begin to, and they're not saving anything, and they're in their 40s, and it just catches up to you. So I think people, overspend on their homes, a lot of people on the cars, food, and college. I mean, a lot of people shop for a college. Think about shopping for a home without a budget, right? That's what people do with college. They say, this is the college. And then it's like, well, how much is it going to cost, right? And it's like, well, I'll get loans, I'll get this and that. And we need to change, we need to shift significantly. So this college loan, either they go away or they are minimized significantly.
Do you think it's also like people don't have a real clear understanding? Like, you get a mortgage for X amount, or you take a college loan for X amount, but you're not paying, say you got a mortgage loan for $100,000. You're not paying $100,000 back. You're paying $200,000 or whatever it is over the course of the life of that loan. Do you think people don't have a real concept of that? Like what they're really paying on, like whether it's a student loan, the interest?
No idea. I mean, you say amortization schedule, and people are like, I mean, what is that? They don't really understand what that is or what it means. And I think for college, my sister's 12 years younger than me. And I remember when she was going, I sat with her and kind of went through, and I was like, this is when you graduate. And I think every parent really should do this. When you graduate, this is the job. And actually in my book, I have an example of how to kind of calculate this. But if you're going for a teaching degree, the average teaching salary is X. After taxes, after savings, this is what you have left. So this is how much, and you should only spend, 10 to 15% on your student loan. This is how much you can afford in a student loan. And don't go over that. And I think that has to be on the mind of every, and a lot of parents can afford to pay, have saved and can afford to pay. But when it comes to loans, we can't saddle our kids with student debt. They have enough, kind of against them financially. So that's a huge area that people overspend, and it's not necessary, in my opinion.
So I know we've been talking about children, but what about us adults? I guess I'm an adult, right? So what about adults during these uncertain times? What is your advice to us when we're going through a period like we've been going through, and how can we feel more financially in control when nothing is in our control?
Yeah, I mean, that's a tough one. Because, all the things that should be done to prepare are like having an emergency fund, right? We always look at budgets. We call fixed expenses and discretionary expenses, right? So fixed are like food that you really need, right? Not our excess in food, but food that you need, pay for your mortgage, pay for your electric, basic spending. And then discretionary, and you sort of build a budget that way. So when you have tough times, that discretionary can go away. So you don't need all that additional income. And if you have an emergency fund and it can cover, 3 to 6 months of your spending, if you get rid of your discretionary spending, it can actually take you into maybe even a year of expenses. And traditionally, at least with markets, the typical recession is, it's about, 9 to 14 months. So if you think in terms of, any disaster maybe that we'll see where there's the potential of a recession, which means job loss and all sorts of other things, not including a pandemic, that's the safety net. And a lot of people don't have that and they're dealing with it right now. So what I say is like, do the best you can, pay the bills you can pay, just, keep your head above water as best you can. There's a lot of concessions being made, but make sure when we get out of this, you have a plan so you never have to go through this again.
So you talk about like, getting through it, right? But then once they get through it and things are better, right? Should they then go, like, how aggressive should they be about resaving for that again? Should that be something like they really focus on, or should be like, okay, got my head above water, now ease up? Do you know what I mean? Or should they start going, okay, let me get into that saving for that 14-month cycle again, or whatever the case is?
Yeah, I mean, you start saving immediately. And then once you have, excess, then you start investing that, right? I mean, and I always say, I'm like, you have to think of saving as purchasing freedom, right? A lot of people think of savings as, it's just a pain. It's just this, they can't spend it. But it's really, if you think about what it allows you in the future to do a lot of things in your life that you wouldn't otherwise be able to do if you didn't spend that money, right? It's a tool to help you reach financial freedom, which is a different definition for everyone. It could mean no longer working. It could mean stop working at a 9 to 5 and do something else because now you're financially free to breathe a little bit and take a leap of faith and start a business or whatever it is. But if you don't save, you're never going to get there.
So you mentioned investing. How much money do you need, would you say you need to invest money?
So, I mean, I always would, first of all, if there's a 401k, a 403b or something like that, a work plan that's matching contributions, you do that because it's free money. So you always do your match for, wherever you are. And then if you are a business owner and you have a SEP or a SIMP, there's all sorts of different plans that you could have. Money in those accounts grows tax-free until, you're in your 70s. So it's a really good place to save and invest money. And they're very low. I mean, it's about, $7,000, $8,000, depending on your age that you can save. So that's a good place to save and then invest so that you get the benefit of compounding interest and growth. And then otherwise in your, once you get an emergency fund and you have that and you feel comfortable that that's earning a decent amount of interest in a bank account, I'd start just dollar cost averaging, every month. If it's $50, it's $50. I mean, there's a ton of different, E-Trade, Vanguard, Robinhood. I mean, there's so many options out there now. You don't have to pay an advisor. I say, but once you get to a point where you've got sort of pockets of assets and you don't have an overall investment strategy and plan, that's when I think, you need to engage a financial advisor. But early on, you just start. I mean, it's more about, again, the habit of it, just getting the habit of putting that money in, and it will work for you and grow over the long term in an investment account.
How do you feel about those apps, like the app Acorns? Like I'm just asking, personal questions. I have this app, the Acorns app, and everybody's like, you have to get the Acorns app. And I was like, all right, so now I have it. I mean, I think it's grown because I set up monthly contributions, small amount of money just to come out, and then I do the roundups. I mean, what is your thought on apps like that?
I think any tool that can help people save money is
a good
great.
tool.
I don't think it could replace having it doesn't really give you a plan, but it gets you to start. I mean, a lot of people cannot wrap their head around, compounding interest and growth, right? They don't understand it. And so when you have an app like Acorns and you suddenly see, wow, I'm only rounding up and I have $500 I wouldn't have had otherwise. And next year it's $1,500. I mean, that really gets people excited and they learn from doing that. So I think it's great. And I think it's a great way to start.
Brian, am I forgetting anything?
No, I think we covered a lot today. Some
I
really
know.
great
There's
information.
my head's once I talk about money for a half hour, I need to go buy some food or something. So
She needs to go spend it. No, don't do that. Remember, save it. Save it.
really, really quick,
Or at
because
least
it's like
20% of it.
one thing, yeah. Well, one thing that we actually did the past couple of weeks, we started ordering food every night, but then I don't spend as much at Target, right? Like, so instead of spending the same amount at Target, like I could just buy less food and I still don't have to cook. So, I mean, there's a workaround.
Whatever works, right? It's different for everybody. Well, the one thing I didn't say that, and I don't know if you've ever read the book, The Richest Man in Babylon, but it's this book, and it's a series of parables about a bunch of kids who grew up together, and most of them are working, doing the same manual labor, making the same amount of money, paycheck to paycheck, and their friend, who all else equal, is now the richest man in Babylon. And the bottom line from that book is, well, how did we all had the same starting point, same education. How did one succeed in the way he did? And he says, well, what do you do when you get your paycheck?
Mhm.
And they're like, well, I pay the grocer, I go to the grocery store, I pay for my mortgage, I pay for this and this. And they said, well, what happens? There's nothing left. And he said, well, I pay myself first. And they said, what? He said, I pay myself first. I take 20% and I put it in for myself for my future. And then whatever's left is what's for me to spend to pay all these other folks. And I think if we start to do that and we really start to think about, okay, this money is for me, for my family first, before you incur any other debt or have, whatever's left over for food, you can spend if you want, as long as you took care of yourself. So I think that's just a good thing too, to reinforce for your kids, pay yourself first.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. Can you please tell everybody where they can learn more about you and your book and anything else you want to share?
Sure. My book, it's moneymindedfamilies.org is the website, and you can learn about me and order the book or through Amazon. And then my professional website is charlestoninvestmentadvisors.com. And I'm in Mount Pleasant, South Carolina, but I work nationally.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. It was great to meet you.
You too.
Take care. Remember, pay yourself first. Yep.